Really quickly, for those that don't know, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/HarlandSpinks that you can go to see all of my content ad-free for $1 a month. That's it. That's the announcement. Into the video. There's an aesthetic or core for everything nowadays. Normcore, goblincore, cottagecore, you name it. It doesn't even have to be coherent to be an aesthetic. Like core. One of the more pervasive, embarrassing, and honestly, pretty gross aesthetics is povertycore or poor cosplay. Poorcore. And I think I've found the final boss of the manic pixie pick-me of poorcore purveyors, Magnolia Pearl. Magnolia Pearl has gone full Charlie Chaplin with a ketamine addiction aesthetic to the point of parody. Apparently the company started by selling a handbag made of kite string for $100, and I'm not even sure what that means. For the uninitiated, Magnolia Pearl is a Texas-based fashion brand founded by Robin Brown, a woman with the fashion sense of a hoarder experiencing a manic episode. I get to make that joke because she also leans into some very racist and tone-deaf references to Native Americans and slave-era plantations in her designs. Before we get any further into the topic of cosplaying as poor when you're actually not, let's talk about something everyone deserves access to, no matter your tax bracket: spicing up your sex life. That's why I'm partnering with Bellesa, because personal pleasure is more fun when it's free. Bellesa is literally sending out free sex toys and gift cards for toys to everyone who signs up for my giveaway. Everyone! Link is in the description, so go claim yours. Bellesa's whole mission is to empower people to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality without shame. Bellesa has options for everyone too. Singles, couples, whoever's in the room and is consenting, and that also includes men, as you can see here. You don't need to feel weird about using a toy, fellas. Modern men who value efficiency use toys and embrace their sexuality. All their products are made from body-safe silicone and built to last longer than, I don't know, whatever you're currently using to get your rocks off. The Halo 2 is a great option for couples. It's waterproof, rechargeable, and designed to amplify pleasure for both partners with stronger, quieter vibrations. Ooh. Can you hear that? The Key Vibe is a discreet panty vibrator, and I'm so sorry to anyone who hates to hear that word, but it's what the copy says. So the clip goes on the outside of the panties, underwear. Oh! It's similar design to a car key, and like a car key, it turns your partner on, but it will not start a car. No one will be able to tell that this is for a personal vibrating device and not your Toyota Corolla. And for the guys, the Ultra Blow and Blow Pro. They thrust, rotate, and vibrate at multiple speeds. Whoa! Look at that! Oh, it's a little tease. Oh, there we go. Hey, hell yeah. Who needs a ChatGPT girlfriend when you can win one of these bad boys? As you can see here, the Blow Pro has a transparent chamber so you can watch, because men can't help but look at any mechanical device and think, how does this thing work? It's really combining the two things men love most: masturbation and problem solving. So whether you're broke or bougie or somewhere in between, everyone deserves good sex and self-love. Click the link, sign up, and get your free toy or gift card from Bellesa today. Thanks again to Bellesa for sponsoring this video. Now back to people spending $500 to look completely unfuckable in their Depression-era breadline cosplay. The brand seems to romanticize a kind of southern pastoral fantasy that's less about craftsmanship and more about selective nostalgia that sanitizes the aesthetics of an era built on slavery and servitude. Their luxury aesthetic exists at the intersection of whiteness and historical amnesia, the same way plantation weddings became Pinterest trending venues, or how brands like Ralph Lauren built entire empires off sepia-tinged Americana that conveniently erases who actually worked the land. It's the aestheticization of the fantasy of simple living without recognizing the people who created that simplicity, so to say. It's an homage to labor with all the labor removed. It is kind of an interesting clothing brand, if only because it's so niche. They don't advertise heavily, and they're part of this small underground collection of high-end, if you know kind of fashion labels. That doesn't mean they aren't popular though. Famous people really love them. In 2021, Taylor Swift was styled in one of their 1890s inspired slip dress gowns, reminiscent of homesteading pioneer hipsters, I guess. Johnny Depp has also worn a lot of their clothes, which makes sense because he looks like an eccentric 19th century wino now. Their clothes are patchwork, train conductor chore coats, and floral leggings with cream lace and tramp-style shoes that look like they were designed by a child. It's very 1910s freak folk ensemble with a French horn for some reason, but more insufferable. Obviously, none of this stuff is actually vintage or secondhand. It's all fake distressing and open seams that are so exaggerated their product photos look like caricatures you'd find in a political cartoon that's extremely derisive towards people who actually live in poverty. The brand is a smorgasbord of influences haphazardly stitched together, pun intended. Hippies, beatniks, a bit of steampunk, and new age anti-vax tradwife cults. Robin Brown herself says she's inspired by her own life and interests. Victorian era design, Oliver Twist, skateboarding, surfing, carnivals, and yes, hobos. That's a weird thing to be interested in. Also, I don't think we can say that word anymore. It's like she saw Zoolander and didn't understand that it was a comedy satirizing the trickle-up effect. And honestly, I don't think she's actually aware of the derelict collection from the movie because she seems far too self-serious to partake in satirical comedy. Hobo originally referred to itinerant workers traveling the country for jobs, but I think the jobs she's basing her designs off of are things like non-binary Dickensian brawler and Burning Man pirate. According to Brown, her own grandfather was apparently a hobo who owned a Ferris wheel in San Antonio. Her father was a drug addict, and her mother worked as a prostitute, which might explain some of the whimsical Victorian brothel slip dresses she makes. She says she lived on food stamps, was frequently homeless, and that her brother ate out of the dumpster. That's awful if true, but it's also so weird to commodify your own past hardship into a parody of that life, and then make pants out of it. It's also why I'm a bit skeptical of her claims, because she seems to fundamentally misunderstand poor culture and what it's like to actually live in poverty. Speaking from my own personal experience growing up somewhat poor, the last thing I want to be reminded of are all the hand-me-downs and squalor. To be clear, I wasn't ever homeless, but the only time I got a new pair of Payless shoes is when I wore holes in the bottoms of the old ones, and more often than not, left overnight was dinner. I've never had a safety net with parents that would be able to pay my rent when things got tough, and I'd often have negative money in my bank, having to scrounge around for change in order to buy a loaf of bread. So my feelings about economic status and this fetishization of poverty really grinds my gears. Only rich people can dress like this and still be taken seriously. If you are poor and dress like this, good luck ever not being poor, because the powers that be will never take you seriously. So it's a real slap in the face of everyone struggling to make ends meet when some eccentric turns that life into a $500 fanciful smock. And look, there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from your life and incorporating it into your art. But this is cosplay, especially considering many of their clients are people like Johnny Depp and Taylor Swift, who, let's be honest, do not give a fuck about the homeless and are not good people. Surprisingly, Whoopi Goldberg is also a fan who commented on people taking issue with the brand by saying, "Listen, if everybody bitches about everything, we'll all be naked," which is such a dumb argument because it implies that we should either stop wearing clothes or doing anything just because someone complained, regardless of if those complaints are valid. It's one thing to buy a pack of cheap t-shirts made overseas because you're broke, and another to spend $5,000 on a pair of ethically made overalls designed to make you look like a filthy bum. Apparently, it's totally acceptable when a company profits off the aesthetic of actual impoverished people. Sure, all clothes should be made ethically, but people forced to buy unethically made clothes don't have a choice because it's the only affordable option, and they shouldn't have to walk around unclothed. Magnolia Pearl, on the other hand, does have a choice, and they've chosen to make what is maybe ethically made impoverished cosplay that is existentially unethical. They even went so far as to import 3 barns from across the US to combine them into a 3-story building for their Fredericksburg, Texas storefront. For what? For who? Why are you doing all this to sell clothes for the people out of a dilapidated barn? The stores themselves have been called Saw Chic, as in Saw the horror movies. A very welcoming environment, I'm sure, to shop for your Charlie Chaplin costume, which I have to say is quite the juxtaposition. They don't just dabble in exploiting economically disadvantaged people. In 2023, they made a collection of t-shirts screen printed with the faces of Native American people, calling it the Geronimo shirt. It's described as, quote, presenting this indigenous leader with all reverence in the spirit of sharing the ways, championing the rights, and remembering the history of Native people. I'm an idiot, but there has to be a better way to champion indigenous rights than slapping a photo of one of their leaders on a gauzy pink t-shirt. There's a recurring theme of heritage as an aesthetic you can don at your leisure. For Magnolia Pearl, cultural identity isn't a lived experience, it's a fucking mood board. So why is this happening? Why is this company so successful? Firstly, Magnolia Pearl isn't an anomaly or the only company to participate in the travesty of aesthetic gentrification. They are, however, maybe the perfect example of what sociologists call the trickle-up effect. First described by Paul Bloomberg in the 1970s, it theorizes how new trends are found in lower class or urban cultures and then adopted by the upper classes. For a long time, fashion was thought to trickle down, where the rich dictated style and the poor imitated it. And if I've learned anything from economics, it's that anything that's called trickle down definitely works and makes everyone's life better. By the 1950s, that changed and the lower classes started influencing fashion instead. Well, maybe not instead, but rather more. A big reason this happens is because flaunting your wealth eventually becomes uncool. The trend comes in waves where throughout history, sometimes showing off your wealth is chic, other times it's vulgar. Even the Bible tells you not to boast of your riches. By the mid-20th century, youth culture started rejecting class hierarchy by growing out their hair and untucking their shirts and putting pants on women. Ew. Vivienne Westwood basically did the same thing in the 70s by exploiting the punk scene in a similar way that Magnolia Pearl exploits the poor. Poor people just really can't catch a break, can they? As a specific item of clothing, jeans are a really good example of this. Originally made for miners and cowboys because denim was tough, jeans became a symbol of rebellion in the 1950s with things like motorcycle and car culture and sex pervert greasers. Now, the only way to get jeans made with that same quality is to spend $200 to $400 or more on small batch heritage denim. The same thing happened with hippie culture. The lower middle class surf and skate inspired styles eventually became a luxury, or at the very least cool. But look at brands like Bode styling Chris Pine in boho short shorts. It happened with grunge in the 90s with oversized flannels and ripped jeans that were a rejection of high fashion's waspy aesthetic of the time. Then Marc Jacobs and Jill Sander turned it into runway fashion in the form of heroin chic. And we're still living with the fallout of their influence. From the 90s to today, basically, people don't see the purpose in climbing the social ladder. So dressing in a certain way that emulated a high status also seemed pointless. There are still people who follow trickle-down fashion, but more and more it's cool to be your authentic self by dressing for whatever class you are a part of and owning it, rather than faking it. But you know, you gotta fake it to make it. It's all fucked up, man. And because rich people aren't content in their ivory tower, they start to seek out other aesthetics they can wear for a few seasons before discarding them and reinventing themselves. The internet has stratified culture even more to the point there's a style for everyone now. Not only is it not cool to imitate the rich in some circles, you don't have to. And while that's good in some ways, it's also how we ended up with Magnolia Pearl turning poverty into a seasonal lookbook. People interested in brands like this often have no real struggle in their own lives. Wearing these clothes lets them feel like they're stepping into someone else's cartoon clown shoes, and then walking a mile with their bindle. They even do charity work claiming their Peace Warrior Foundation. God, what a shitty name. And portions of proceeds are donated, which makes it easier for buyers to feel morally justified spending $2,000 on a pair of tramp overalls fit for a couple of hobos sharing a bean. I don't want to just sit here and rag on Magnolia Pearl because it's not just about them or the fashion industry at large. Way back in 2017, Kim and Kanye released a photo shoot staged to look like a 1990s middle-class family photo album. It featured Kim in a wood-paneled kitchen wearing a look that can only be described as frazzled single mother with no time to put pants on, making sandwiches, and pretending to live in a modest home. And to the surprise of no one, there were detractors asking, why are they trying so hard to look poor? It wasn't even poverty cosplay, it was middle class cosplay, which might be even more insulting as she pranced around pretending to play homemaker. Celebrities have started to remove other wealth signifiers. Remember how I said we're still feeling the effects of heroin chic? Well, a lot of celebrities now, including Kim Kardashian herself, are dissolving their fillers and removing implants and injecting Ozempic to get that wayfish 3 a.m. bender appearance. Once something becomes accessible, like cosmetic surgery, rich people lose interest because it no longer sets them apart from the average person. It doesn't help when those people start to draw comparisons with your very expensive body mods and absolutely botched surgeries. Wealthy people don't really want to associate with people getting rubber cement butt implants. And what's the point of having all that wealth if it doesn't differentiate you from Debbie's new face in Muncie, Indiana? The pursuit of low-class aesthetics by the wealthy isn't new. In fact, it's quite old. All the way back during the French Revolution, the Palace of Versailles was a lavish symbol of the French monarchy, at least to the average commoner. They were having exquisite banquets and hunting trips and were afforded luxuries 99% of the population would never be able to participate in or even lay their eyes on, let alone have access to. However, the most iconic symbol of opulence among the wealthiest class was actually a faux pastoral village that belonged to Marie Antoinette, where she could cosplay as a country maiden and indulge in an idyllic fantasy of rustic life. Now, does that sound familiar nowadays to tradwife influencers like Nara Smith or Hannah Nealman? Baking bread from scratch is now considered a luxury because the majority of people do not have the spare time to do what was once considered manual labor. Everything's all topsy-turvy. High-class aesthetics are always about exclusivity. When everyone was farming, having a useless decorative lawn was a status symbol because it produced no value. Beauty standards work the same way. Pale skin once signaled wealth because it meant you didn't labor outdoors. Now, a golden tan signals that you can afford leisure time, traveling the world, soaking up the once reviled rays of the sun. Trends of all kinds flip like this constantly. Distressed jeans, once a sign of labor, became a luxury. Now, crisp selvage denim signals wealth. Eventually, it'll probably switch back. Balenciaga took this to the most extreme with their $1,800 destroyed sneakers that looked like they went through a graffiti artist's wood chipper. There's a constant ebb and flow of societal perception and individual identity. The trickle-up effect is simply a romanticized notion of life defined by scarcity. Wealth can't replicate struggle. Literally, it's the antithesis of that, but it can by the image of it. When everything in your life is automated by algorithmic control and managed by a staff of interns planning your decisions for you, poverty starts to look like freedom. These people are imprisoned in some ways by their wealth and thus struggle to be authentic. And I'm by no means saying that they've got it hard or you should feel bad for them. Just that Magnolia Pearl sells the illusion of being unmediated, even though it's meticulously manufactured. Some of it might come from wealthy people's desire to reconnect with some kind of humble beginning, but I prefer the more cynical take that it's a total lack of imagination. I refuse to believe the majority of wealthy people are that self-aware and perceptive. After you've worn every possible fancy thing using the rarest of materials, the only new frontier is digging through the trash like a filthy raccoon. Even Crocs has turned their once utilitarian dorky shoe into a high fashion item through, once again, a Balenciaga collaboration. But once you rebrand something low class into luxury, redesigning it almost completely into an unrecognizable high fashion version of itself, you've kind of lost the plot. And it's not just clothes or general aesthetics. You see it in restaurants that serve elevated versions of cheap food like potato chips, potato chips, and macaroni and cheese as luxury dining. They can't leave well enough alone, like a petulant, spoiled child who throws a tantrum when a classmate gets something they don't have, even if what they don't have is in some cases literally nothing. It's why I hate minimalism. There's also the trickle-round effect, where low status groups distinguish themselves from the middle class, and those signals get adopted by the upper class before they ever even reach the middle. The trickle-round effect used to take years, with styles moving from subcultures to runways and finally to malls as some bastardized version of both. Now it happens in days or weeks. Online, class signifiers don't even have to exist in reality to become trends anymore. You can cosplay poverty through an Instagram reel you made after seeing a poverty starter pack meme. It's a shorthand for authenticity that costs nothing to imitate, but everything to fake well. And there's a distinction. The original context disappears because everything online is simply content meant to be consumed and then either thrown away or regurgitated into a worse version, like a photocopy of a photocopy. Poverty, like everything else, becomes a vibe curated by a woman wearing sweatpants as a headscarf and a wooden barrel as a dress. Magnolia Pearl is that photocopy of a photocopy, where rich people play dress up as poor people, but a version so deep fried you can barely make out if it's Johnny Depp as a steampunk coal miner or Blake Lively as a Romani carnival barker. That's the video. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you made it this far, that means you are special. Now you gotta follow the rules of the channel. I think my voice just cracked. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Like I said at the top, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Harland Spinks, that you can go pay $1 a month to get all my content ad-free. I have an Instagram at Harland Spinks, where you can also go follow me to get updates when new videos come out. And behind the scenes, pics and memes. That's it. Until next time, vanish.